you. I want to go back just and cover the CS3D relatively briefly, because you've been asked about that a few times, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive coming out of Europe, where U.S. businesses could be sued by the EU for simply doing business with so-called high-impact companies, such as natural gas. And that's a real big concern of mine, as well as coal. Madam Secretary, coal, as you very well know, is essential for the production of steel. And every company is producing steel, particularly anthracite steel, which I have an abundance of in my district. If the EU were to pass something like this, it could, and there are analysis on this, affect the stock prices and the valuations and the business of over 63% of the S&P 500, and really set a precedent that Europe can regulate the United States. And certainly the EU is in high demand for LNG. So I'm really asking you, as a governor of the IMF, are we pushing, or not just the IMF, but in general, in your role, are we pushing back strongly on this? Are we doing an analysis? Are we really taking this very seriously to relate it to the CS3D?
I'm sorry, the CSDD?
The Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive?
That's an EU initiative, and I've indicated that we have concerns about it, that it can impact our firms in ways that would have unintended consequences that concern us.
And you did indicate that, but doing just, say, $150 million in business in Europe, if a company does $1 billion here, that regulation would be mandated for that company as a whole.
That's why we have concerns. I agree.
Significant concerns, I would hope, Madam Secretary. So, are you doing a cost-benefit analysis of this? What its effect would be? Is that part of your due diligence?
Well, I don't think we have to do a cost-benefit analysis, but I think we do have to express our concerns to the EU and try to see that they're addressed.
Okay, I'm hoping we can be kept updated on this, Secretary, because again, this is a real serious issue that I'm not sure too many businesses are fully aware of, being regulated by the EU.
It's not yet final legislation, right. It's draft,
right.
And it's hard to know exactly what its impact will be on EU firms, but we advocate for it to be addressed by the EU.
I do want to ask you this, more of a broad question. Does the Treasury, your department obviously, the Fed, the White House, do you have conversations where you look at the economy as a whole and say, look, with all the Fed stimulus, with this excessive spending, let's face it, that took place, a slowdown of American energy, which had a lot to do with the spiking of gasoline prices, which obviously attributes to inflation, a rise of interest rates, which is doing awful things that I want to talk about on the service to our debt. But do you have the conversation, say, let's take a holistic view here, and maybe we should have some pro-growth initiatives?
We certainly take a holistic view, have many discussions of the outlook and what's appropriate. And I will say that when President Biden was elected and the ARP was passed, the unemployment rate in the United States was exceptionally high. Yeah. And there was a real risk that we would have a generation of Americans.
I don't mean to interrupt, but we had COVID, and that we deliberately shut down the government, and it's the same unemployment rate that we had in 2019, and yet there's still close to 2 million people not working. So it's not working. We've got all this inflation. We've got debt as far as the eye can see. And you know what's unbelievably alarming, Secretary, is that in 2021, when the Biden administration came in, our service on our debt was $275 billion. I'm sure I don't have to tell you these numbers. In 22, it was $385 billion. This year, it's going to be a staggering $660 billion. Next year, it's likely to be higher than our defense. So it's not working. It seems to me the growth strategy is to spend more. I mean, is that considered a growth strategy?
Well, a growth strategy does involve investing in America, and President Biden has put in place proposals and
My time is-
legislation that does
Thank you.
aid our growth.
Thank you, Secretary.